Hey there, and welcome back to ClearPath Conversations. I'm Mark Bernardin. In our last episode, we talked about how to present like you belong in the room. We covered confidence, timing, and executive storytelling. Also, how to handle questions without getting defensive, how to read the room and adjust on the fly, and how to make sure that when you walk out of that EBR, people remember your message, not just your slides. Today, we're talking about what happens after the meeting ends. Because here's the thing. Most CSMs think that the EBR is over when everyone logs off the call or everyone leaves the conference room. They think the work is done when the slides are sent out and the action items are captured. But the truth is that EBR isn't over when the meeting ends. It's over when the follow-up creates momentum. And this is where most people drop the ball. Here's what I've seen happen over and over again at enterprise accounts worth millions in ARR. A CSM runs a solid EBR, good attendance, strong engagement. The customer seems happy. Everyone's nodding along. The internal team feels good. The CSM sends a thank you email that right after the meeting with the deck attached and also the notes from the meeting. And then nothing. A week goes by. The action items just sit there in someone's inbox. The strategic priorities that were discussed in that meeting get buried under the day-to-day firefighting. The customer's executive who attended the meeting never sees a meaningful follow-up. And by the time the next quarterly review rolls around, no one can remember what was committed to in the last one. That's not an EBR failure. That's a follow-up failure. Because the meeting itself that's just the opening act. The real value, the retention, the expansion, the executive trust, all of that gets built in what you do afterwards. And this is where systematic CSMs separate themselves from the reactive ones. So in this episode, we're going to talk about how to follow up in a way that drives expansion, retention, and executive trust. We're going to cover what to send, who to send it to, and when to send it. We're going to talk about how to keep that momentum alive long after you close your PowerPoint. This is part of what I teach in the Executive Business Review Playbook, because if you're not following up strategically, you're literally leaving money on the table, and you're undermining the work you just did in the EBR. Let's start with the basics. The first follow-up happens immediately after the meeting, ideally within a few hours, definitely within 24 hours. Not 3 days later, not next week, not when you get around to it. Same day if possible. Next morning at the latest. This is a non-negotiable. It's in the Executive Business Review Playbook as a core post-EBR practice. Send the executive summary in one-pager immediately. Tag internal teams with follow-up actions, and then within 48 hours, recap to your champion and reinforce alignment. This cadence demonstrates reliability and keeps momentum alive when executives are still thinking about what was discussed. And here's exactly what that immediate follow-up needs to include. Number one, a thank you. Just short, genuine, direct. Thank you for your time today. We value your partnership and the opportunity to align on priorities for Q2. That's it. You're not writing a novel. You're acknowledging their time and reinforcing the relationship. Number 2, just a recap of what was discussed. This is where you synthesize the meeting into 3, maybe 4 takeaways. We discussed 3 main areas: your progress towards reducing phishing incidents by 40%, the upcoming rollout to your EMEA offices, and the alignment of our roadmap with your Q2 security initiatives. Notice what I'm doing here. I'm not just listing agenda items. I'm framing the conversation around their goals with their language and their priorities. Number 3, confirmed action items with owners and dates. Again, this is a non-negotiable. Here's what we committed to. Our team will deliver the updated deployment timeline by March 20th. Your team will confirm the EMEA stakeholder list by March 15th. We'll schedule a follow-up call for March 27th to review our progress. Every action item needs a who, a what, and a when. If it doesn't have all 3, it's not an action item. It's a wish. Number 4 is next steps. This is where you really keep the momentum going. We'll send a formal proposal for the expansion modules by the end of the week. In the meantime, if any questions come up, I'm available. You're not closing the loop here. You're actually opening the next one. And that right there is your 24-hour follow-up. Just 1 page, maybe 2 if you include some meeting notes, but keep it tight, keep it clear, and send it to everyone who was in the room. Now, here's where it gets interesting, because that email is just a start. The real follow-up happens over the next 30 days. And see, this is where most CSMs think that they're done. They've sent the recap, they've captured the action items, they think the customer is going to just reach out if they need anything. But that's reactive. And reactive doesn't build relationships. Reactive doesn't drive expansion. Reactive doesn't create executive trust. You need to be proactive. So here's what the next 30 days looks like. Week 1, you're executing on the commitments that you made in that EBR. If you said that you would send something by Friday, you send it by Thursday. If you committed to a call next week, you get it on the calendar this week. That's where you prove you're not just talking, you're doing. Week number 2, you're checking in with your internal team. Things like, we committed to delivering the deployment timeline. Where are we on that? Do we have what we need? Is there anything blocking? Because here's the truth. Your internal team, they're busy. And unless you're actively managing those commitments, they're just going to slip. So you're the one who keeps it going. You're the one who makes sure that what was discussed in the EBR actually gets done. Week 3 is you're re-engaging the customer. Not with a just checking in email. Oh, God, those are useless. You're re-engaging with value. I wanted to share an update on the deployment timeline that we discussed. We're on track to deliver by March 20th, and I've attached a preview for your review. Let me know if you have any questions before we finalize it. You're not waiting for them to come to you. You're bringing them into the process. Week 4, you're preparing for the next milestone. Maybe that's a follow-up call, maybe a proposal review, maybe that's an internal alignment meeting to prepare for the next phase. But whatever it is, you're thinking ahead. You're not just reacting to what happened last month. You're setting up what happens next month. That's the 30-day cadence. And if you do this well, you're not just following up on an EBR, you're building a rhythm. Now let's talk about the executive summary. One of the most powerful post-EBR artifacts that you can create. Because here's what a lot of CSMs miss. Not everyone who needed to be in the EBR was actually in that room. And the people who weren't there are sometimes the real decision makers. Maybe the CFO couldn't make it. Maybe the CIO sent a delegate. Maybe there's a board member or an advisor who needs to know what was discussed before they'd approve a budget for expansion. So you need a one-page executive summary that can be forwarded on up the chain. This isn't a nice to have. This is a strategic tool that extends your reach beyond just the people that were in the meeting. And it's not your meeting notes. It's not your deck. This is a standalone document that answers 3 executive questions in one page. The first question, what did we accomplish? Not what we discussed, what we accomplished. We aligned on Q2 priorities, confirmed deployment timelines for the EMEA rollout, and identified 2 expansion opportunities that will be formally proposed by the end of the month. Question number 2 is, what are the next steps? Same format as before, who, what, and when. Question number 3 is, what do we need from the leadership? And this is your ask, and it's direct. We need approval for the additional modules by April 1st to stay on track for the Q2 rollout. That's your executive summary, just one page, clean, forwardable, and written in a way that makes it easy for your champion to share it with their leadership. Because if you make it easy for your champion to make you look good, they will. Let me give you a real example of how this executive summary strategy works. I was working with a large healthcare organization, managing a 7-figure account. We just completed an EBR with their director of security ops. It was a great meeting, had strong engagement. We confirmed the next phase of the rollout and discussed expansion into their international offices. But I knew the real decision maker wasn't in the room. It was the CISO, and the CISO had bigger priorities and a packed calendar. So after the meeting, I sent the director of security ops the standard follow-up, but I also included a one-page executive summary specifically designed for the CISO. And I said, feel free to forward this to Bob, the CISO's name, and if it's helpful. I designed it so it could be shared up the chain without requiring any additional context from you. A couple days later, I got an email from Bob. Hey, thanks for the summary. Let's schedule time next month to discuss the international expansion. That one email led to a 6-figure expansion because I made it easy for my champion to make me look good to their boss. Now let's talk about what you don't do in the follow-up. You don't oversell. The EBR, that was the pitch. The follow-up is about execution and alignment. If you start pushing new products or add-ons in the follow-up, you're going to kill the trust that you just built. Also, you don't disappear. I've seen this pattern destroy otherwise solid CSM careers. CSM runs a great EBR, sends a solid follow-up, and then goes dark for 6 weeks because they think the customer's all set. No. Strategic CSMs maintain a rhythm. Not overbearing, not needy, but present. You're checking in with value, not just touching base. You're advancing the work and not just reminding people that you exist. You don't let action items slip. If you've said that you'd do something by Friday and you don't, you just undermined everything that you built in the EBR. So if something's going to be late, you communicate that proactively. You reset expectations. You don't just let it slide. And you definitely don't treat the follow-up like an afterthought. This is where the real work happens. The EBR opens the door. The follow-up keeps it open. Let me give you another example from Deep Watch. This one shows how patient strategic follow-up turns EBRs into expansion. We had a customer, a large financial services company, had a big portfolio worth over $2 million in ARR. We'd been trying to expand with them for months. Great relationship, solid usage, but every time we brought up expansion, we got the same pushback. It's not in the budget. It's not a priority, maybe next quarter. So we scheduled an EBR, and in that EBR, we didn't pitch the expansion. We just showed value. We walked through the metrics. We highlighted the outcomes that they'd achieved. We aligned on their Q3 priorities. We focused entirely on their business results, not on what we wanted to sell them. And at the end of the meeting, their VP of IT operations said, "This has been really helpful. Let's talk about expansion next month." We didn't push. We just stayed focused on value and let them come to us. So here's what I did in the follow-up. I sent the standard recap within 24 hours, thanked them for their time, confirmed the action items, but I also included a strategic line at the bottom. When you're ready to discuss expansion, I've prepared a proposal based on what we talked about yesterday. Happy to walk through it whenever it makes sense for your timeline. And then I waited. I didn't follow up every 3 days asking if they were ready. I stayed engaged on the core work. I kept delivering value and just trusted the process. 2 weeks later, I got an email. "Hey, can we schedule some time next week to review that proposal?" So we scheduled the call. We walked through the proposal, and we closed a $400,000 expansion within 30 days of that EBR. That's what strategic follow-up looks like. You're not pushy. You're not passive. You're present. You're prepared, and you're patient. You position yourself as a trusted advisor, not a vendor chasing after a deal. Because expansion doesn't happen in the meeting. It happens in the follow-up. Now, here's what you need to track. Because strategic CSMs don't just hope things get done. They build accountability into the process. After every EBR, you should have a follow-up tracker. This is just a simple document. It could be a spreadsheet, Notion doc, whatever. It could be a task list in your CRM, but it needs to capture specific elements. Action items from the EBR with clear owners and hard dates. Not Q2, not soon. Actual dates like March 27th. Follow-up touch points scheduled for the next 30 days. When will you re-engage? What value will you bring? What milestones are you working towards? Also, next milestones. Things like proposal review, expansion discussion, next EBR. You're always thinking 2 steps ahead. And you review this every week, not once a month when you happen to remember, every week during your portfolio planning time. Because if you're not tracking it systematically, it's not getting done. And if it's not getting done, you've wasted everyone's time in the EBR. And here's the other thing you should track. Sentiment. After the EBR, how did the customer feel? Did they respond positively to your follow-up? Did they engage with the action items? Did they move forward on the next steps? Because if you're getting radio silence after an EBR, that's a red flag. It means that something didn't land, and you need to course correct before the next touch point. So pay attention, not just to what's being said, but to what's not being said. Let me give you one more scenario, because this is where maturity as a CSM really shows. You've just run an EBR. It went okay, not great, not terrible, just okay. The customer showed up, they listened, they nodded along, but you didn't get the engagement that you were hoping for. No big commitments, no excitement, just a polite, thanks for the update. This happens. Even with solid preparation, sometimes the executive has something else on their mind. Something, maybe sometimes your timing's off. Sometimes the account just isn't where you thought it was. So what do you do in the follow-up? Well, you don't pretend it was a home run. You acknowledge reality and you adjust. In your follow-up email, you might say something like, I want to make sure that we're aligned on what matters most to you. If there's anything that we didn't cover that you'd like to revisit, I'd love to schedule a quick follow-up call to dig into that. You're giving them permission to tell you what they really need, and you're showing that you're paying attention to what they're not saying, not just what they are. Because sometimes the best follow-up is just asking, how can I make this more valuable for you? And if they give you an answer, you act on it. You don't defend the EBR. You don't make excuses. You just say, got it. Let's adjust. That's what builds trust. So here's my challenge to you. And this is how you separate yourself as a strategic CSM. The next time you run an EBR, don't let the follow-up be an afterthought. Plan it before the meeting even happens. Know what you're going to send, who you're going to send it to, and when you're going to send it. Build your 30-day cadence. Create your executive summary. Track your action items with actual accountability. And stay engaged in a way that adds value, not just noise. Because the EBR isn't over when the meeting ends. It's over when the follow-up creates momentum that drives retention, expansion, and deepens that executive relationship. And if you do this well, you're not just running EBRs. You're building the kind of strategic relationships that hiring managers look for when they're filling senior CSM roles and team lead positions. You're demonstrating that you understand how enterprise accounts actually work. That it's not about the meeting. It's about what you do with the opportunity that the meeting creates. When I interview CSM candidates, I don't ask them how their last EBR went. I ask them what happened in the 30 days after, because that's where the real work shows up. That's where retention gets protected and expansion gets built. Now, if you want a framework for this, I've got one. It includes a post-EBR follow-up template, an executive summary format, 30-day action tracker that maps directly to what we covered today. It's also all part of the Executive Business Review Playbook. It's designed to help you turn a good EBR into lasting impact. The kind of impact that shows up in your renewal rates and in your expansion numbers and in your ability to command the room with executives. So check that out if you want a head start. In the next episode, we're shifting gears. We're moving into a new mini-series focused on expansion, advocacy, and growth. We're going to talk about how to spot expansion opportunities that are in plain sight, how to read usage patterns and stakeholder signals, and how to time the ask so that it feels natural and not forced. Because expansion doesn't happen by accident. It happens when you're paying attention and you know what to look for. So until then, here's what I'd love you to do. If you ran an EBR in the last 30 days, pull up your follow-up. Look at what you sent and ask yourself, did I create momentum or did I just check a box? If you checked a box, fix it. Send a follow-up this week that adds value. Re-engage the customer. Move the action items forward. That's the work. Follow the show on your favorite platform. Visit clearpathcx.com to grab the post-EBR follow-up framework and other resources, and connect with me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/in/Mark Bernardin. If this episode helped you rethink how you approach EBR follow-up, drop me a message. I read every one. Thank you for being here. Thank you for doing this work. And thank you for showing up and delivering every single day. I'll talk to you soon.